The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Hall of Mirrors, casting fragments of golden light onto the polished marble floor. Tenil Vorten observed his reflection in one of the dozens of ornate mirrors decorating the walls, adjusting the embroidered collar of his dark blue silk shirt. Every movement was calculated. Every gesture carried the certainty of one born to be admired. He tilted his head slightly, allowing his wavy black hair to fall perfectly over his shoulders. His steel-gray eyes studied his own image with the same attention a sculptor dedicates to his masterpiece. Tall, athletic, impeccable. Exactly as a Vorten should be. Still admiring yourself, little brother? The voice came from the marble stairs. Tenel didn't look away from the mirror, merely allowed a side smile to touch his lips. Admiration implies surprise. Dravik. I simply recognize what is evident. Dravik Vorten descended the last steps with a relaxed posture of a confident air. 3 years older than Tenel, he possessed the same aristocratic features, a key, but without the sharp intensity of his younger brother. His brown eyes had a gentler gleam. His laughter came more easily. Father wants to see us in the library before breakfast. Something about the new trade routes with Aloria. Tenel finally turned away from the mirror, adjusting his cuffs with precise movements. Trade routes, as if our family needed more gold. His voice carried a natural aristocratic boredom. But I suppose we must maintain the appearance of being interested in kingdom affairs. Dravik shook his head, amused. You know, it's not just about gold, Tenel. It's about influence, about maintaining our position at court, our position. Tenel arched an eyebrow as he walked toward his brother. Dravik, we are Vorten. Our position isn't something that is maintained, something that simply is, like the sun that rises every morning. Like the natural hierarchy of the world, they crossed the mansion's wide corridors, passing servants who immediately bowed at their approach. Tenel didn't even look at them, his eyes fixed ahead. As if those figures were merely part of the decoration. Furniture, tapestries, servants, all on the same level of relevance. The library of House Vorten occupied the entire east wing of the mansion, with black oak shelves rising to the vaulted ceiling, filled with leather-bound tomes. The smell of old paper and ink mixed with the aroma of imported tea that Lord Vorten enjoyed in the mornings. Lord Caius Vorten sat behind a massive mahogany desk, leafing through maps and scrolls. At 52, he still maintained the military posture of his days as commander in the border wars, his gray hair combed back with rigor, his beard trimmed with geometric precision. When his sons entered, he raised his eyes, and for a moment, Tenel saw something that always bothered him: approval in his gaze for Dravik, and critical evaluation in his gaze for him. Sit. Lord Vorten's voice wasn't harsh, but carried the authority of one accustomed to being obeyed. Tenel and Dravik took their places in the leather chairs facing the desk. I received correspondence from Lord Kasimir this morning. Lord Vorten pushed a sealed scroll toward them. He proposes a commercial partnership with our house. Exclusivity on the southern spice routes in exchange for political support at the next Royal Council Assembly. Dravik leaned forward, interested. Kasimir has always been close to the crown. This could strengthen our position, or make us dependent on him. Tenel's voice cut through the air, like a sharp blade. Father, forgive my frankness, but Lord Kasimir has always seemed to me the type of man who collects favors like a miser collects coins. And debts of favors are the most dangerous. Lord Vorten studied his youngest son with that penetrating gaze. Continue. Exclusivity means he will control our access to spices. If he decides to cut off supply, we lose not only profit, but prestige. Our parties, our banquets, our image before the other noble houses. Tenel interlaced his fingers with calculated elegance. And political support. Support for what, exactly? What legislation does he intend to push that requires our influence? Dravik frowned. You always see conspiracy in everything, brother. I see opportunism, Tenel corrected, his tone cold. And opportunism is the natural language of the court. Kasimir offers nothing out of kindness. He wants something he hasn't yet revealed. Lord Vorten leaned back in his chair, a slow and deliberate movement. For a long moment, he merely observed Tenil, and then something close to a smile touched the corner of his lips. "You're right, son. I already suspected this, but I wanted to see if you could identify it." He tapped his fingers lightly on the desk. Kasimir is trying to consolidate power before the prince's succession. The king is aging, and when he departs, there will be a vacuum of influence. Kasimir wants to ensure he'll have indebted allies when that day comes. And us? Dravik asked. "What's our move?" "Our move is to maintain distance," Lord Vorten replied, taking the scroll and tearing it in two. "Vorten does not bow to other nobles. We don't even bow to the king unless absolutely necessary. Our lineage is too ancient, our blood is too pure, and our position is too strong to become Kasimir's pawns." Tenil felt a wave of satisfaction. Exactly this. Dravik seemed less convinced, his expression thoughtful. "But father, what if we're wrong? What if we reject Kasimir and he becomes indispensable to the next king? Then we'll deal with it when it happens." Lord Vorten's voice was final. "But I didn't build this house by yielding to the first noble who offers sugared gold. You need to understand something. My son's true power doesn't come from convenient alliances. It comes from one's own strength, one's own resources. From a reputation that cannot be tarnished by dubious associations." He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "Dravik, you will accompany the emissaries from Aloria this afternoon. We need to strengthen our direct relations with the neighboring kingdom. Tenil, you will come with me to the docks to inspect the new vessels. It's time you learned more about what truly sustains our wealth." Vessels. Tenil couldn't hide the disdain in his voice. "How much time will I need to spend smelling fish and sailors' sweat?" "As much time as necessary for you to understand that even the Vortant depend on the work of inferior people." Lord Vortant fixed a hard gaze on his son. "Your problem, Tenil, is that you see hierarchy as absolute. And it is. But hierarchies need to be maintained, and to maintain them, you need to understand every level, even the lowest." Tenil felt the reprimand like a slap, but kept his expression neutral. He simply inclined his head in acquiescence. "As you wish, father." When they left the library, Dravik gave Tenil a light pat on the back. "He's right, you know. You need to get out of that bubble of halls and mirrors more." "I don't live in a bubble," Tenil replied, irritation clear in his voice. "I live in reality. And reality is that we were born superior, and pretending we're not is unnecessary hypocrisy." Dravik sighed. "One day, little brother, you'll learn that superiority without empathy is just disguised tyranny. And one day, big brother, you'll learn that empathy without superiority is just disguised weakness." They separated in the corridors, each heading to their commitments. Tenil went up to his chambers, where a servant had already prepared more appropriate clothes for the docks, something less ornate, more practical, but still unquestionably noble. While changing clothes, he looked through the panoramic window overlooking the perfectly symmetrical gardens of Vorten Mansion. Marble fountains spouted crystal-clear water. Imported rose bushes bloomed in geometric patterns, and in the distance, he could see the high walls that separated the property from the rest of the city. His world, perfect, ordered, unquestionable. The smell hit Tenil before he even descended from the carriage. A nauseating mixture of rotten fish, stagnant salt water, human sweat, and something indefinable that only concentrated poverty could produce. He lightly pressed a perfumed handkerchief to his nose, descending with cautious movements, as if the ground itself could contaminate him. Lord Vorten descended behind him with an impassive expression, clearly accustomed to that environment. The docks were an anthill of chaotic activity. Workers dressed in rags carried heavy crates. Sailors shouted incomprehensible orders. Dirty children ran between adults' legs trying to steal anything that wasn't nailed down. It was the antithesis of everything Tenil knew. Noisy, disorganized, dirty, desperate, repulsive. "Keep the handkerchief away," Lord Vorten ordered quietly. "You're here to learn, not to insult." "I don't need to put away the handkerchief not to insult," Tenil murmured. "My mere presence must already be insult enough for these people, Lord." Vorten ignored the comment and headed toward the main warehouses, where the dockmaster awaited, a stocky, middle-aged man named Gorvin. He bowed deeply at the Vorten's approach. "Lord Vorten, it's an honor. The new vessels arrived this morning, exactly as you requested." "Show us." Gorvin guided them through a labyrinth of containers and fishing nets to a specific pier where 3 merchant ships were anchored. They were solid vessels built for endurance rather than speed, with reinforced hulls and multiple cargo holds. While Lord Vorten and Gorvin discussed technical specifications, Tenil allowed his eyes to wander across the docks. He observed the workers with the same distant curiosity one would observe animals in a zoo. Curious creatures, he thought, moving without real purpose beyond basic survival. Near one of the warehouses, a group of workers unloaded sacks of grain. A young woman was among them, and Tenil paused, slightly surprised. Not by her beauty, though. She had strong features that some might consider attractive in a rudimentary way, but by the ferocity with which she worked. Reddish-brown hair stuck to her sweaty forehead, defined muscles tensing as she lifted sacks that men twice her size carried with difficulty. And there was something in her amber eyes, even at a distance, that radiated contained rage. "I see you found something of interest." Lord Vorten's voice appeared beside him. Tenil quickly looked away, just observing the workforce. A woman working with men. "It's not usual. That's Raya Pharaoh's, daughter of old blacksmith Darien," Gorvin explained, following their gaze. "Good worker when she shows up, but problematic. She's already fought with 3 foremen and broke the nose of a merchant who tried to pay less than agreed." "Charming," Tenil commented, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. "I presume she's tolerated for lack of better options." "She's tolerated because she works twice as much as any man here," Gorvin corrected. And there was a note of respect in his voice that irritated Tenil. "And because no one wants to confront her. She carries 2 swords on her back and knows how to use them." At that moment, as if sensing she was being watched, Raya raised her gaze. Her eyes met Tenil's across the distance, and for a second, the world seemed to reduce to that single point of visual contact. There was no reverence in that gaze. There was no fear, or respect, or any of the reactions Tenil was accustomed to receiving. There was only pure and unfiltered contempt. She spat on the ground, deliberate and unmistakable gesture of disrespect before returning to work. Tenil felt his blood boil in his veins. No one, absolutely no one, looked at him that way. "Who does she think she is?" he murmured, more to himself. "A commoner who doesn't know her place." Lord Vorten replied with indifference. "Not worth your time or anger, son. People like that live and die in obscurity. Don't let an instant of insolence ruin your day." But it had already ruined it. That look, that gesture, was engraved in Tenil's mind like an invisible scar. How dare she? They spent another hour at the docks, with Lord Vorten explaining details about trade routes, commodity prices, and the importance of maintaining good relations with merchants. Tenil listened with half his attention, the other half still stuck on that moment of flagrant disrespect. When they finally returned to the carriage, the sun was already beginning to descend on the horizon, painting the sky in orange and purple tones. Tenil sat on the cushioned bench with a sigh of relief, as if he had just escaped a battlefield. "Was that educational?" Lord Vorten asked as the carriage began to move. "It was ... revealing," Tenil replied carefully. "Revealing about how distant we are from that layer of society, and how important it is to maintain that distance." Lord Vorten studied his son with penetrating eyes. You still haven't understood, Tenil. The distance exists, yes? But it needs to be managed. These people you despise are the ones who actually make the kingdom function. Without them, our wealth would be just papers and empty promises. With all due respect, Father, I disagree. Tenel kept his voice firm. Without them, there would be others to replace them. There always are. But without us, without the nobility that organizes, that governs, that brings order to chaos, the kingdom would crumble in weeks. That was all Lord Vorten replied, turning his attention to the landscape passing by the window. They traveled in silence for long minutes, the carriage swaying gently over the roadstones. Tenil closed his eyes, trying to purge the smell of the docks from his memory. But whenever he did, that amber gaze full of anger returned. Raya Feroz. He repeated the name mentally, savoring it like poison on his tongue. When they arrived at the mansion, dusk had already taken over the sky. Servants lit the lanterns in the gardens and through the illuminated windows. Tenel could see Dravik's silhouette in the dining hall, probably narrating stories of his day with the Elorian emissaries. Go change for dinner, Lord Vorten instructed. And Tenel, try not to let a commoner's insolence occupy so much space in your mind. It's not worthy of you. It occupies no space at all. Tenel lied, descending from the carriage. But as he climbed the stairs to his chambers, he knew that was false. That look had planted something in his mind, a small seed of rage he couldn't pull out. Not because he cared about her opinion, but because she had dared to have an opinion. The Vorten family's private dining room was significantly smaller than the main banquet hall, but still exuded opulence. Silver candelabras cast soft light over the polished cherry table, where fine porcelain plates awaited serving. Tenel entered already dressed for dinner. White shirt with discreet silver embroidery, impeccable black trousers. Dravik was already seated, wineglass in hand, animatedly conversing with their mother. Lady Morel Vorten was a woman of mature beauty, blonde hair with silver strands pulled into an elaborate hairstyle. Her pale blue eyes lit up when Tenel approached. "My boy, I heard you spent the day at the docks." She extended her hand delicately, and Tenel kissed it with the automatic reverence of years of etiquette. "I hope the experience wasn't too traumatizing. Just instructive." Mother Tenel sat down. Accepting the wineglass a servant silently filled. "I learned there's an entire world beyond our walls that functions on completely different principles from ours." "Inferior principles," Lady Morel completed with a delicate smile. "But necessary, I suppose." Dravik laughed. "You two are impossible. Mother, the world is undivided into superior and inferior as easily as you and Tenel like to think." "Of course it is," Lady Morel replied, her voice soft but absolute. "There are those who are born to govern and those who are born to serve. This is the natural order established by the gods themselves. To question this is to question the very fabric of reality." Lord Vorten entered at that moment, having already changed into dinner clothes. He took his place at the head of the table, and immediately the servants began bringing the dishes: rare herb soup, fresh breads, perfectly roasted meats, vegetables seasoned with imported spices. For a time, they ate in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only ancient and self-assured families can enjoy. It was Dravik who eventually broke the quiet. "The emissaries from Eloria brought interesting news. Apparently, there are rumors of instability in the royal court. King Aldrich is sicker than imagined." Lord Vorten paused with his fork in the air. "Rumors are not facts, Dravik. But it's something to monitor. If the king is truly weakening, we'll need to ensure our position is solidified before the transition of power." "And Lord Kasimir?" Tenel asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "I imagine he's making moves as well." "Kasimir is always making moves," Lord Vorten replied with certain disdain. "He's a man who confuses frantic activity with real efficiency. But yes, he'll be trying to consolidate allies. All the more reason to maintain our independence." Lady Morel delicately set down her fork. You speak of politics as if it were a board game. Sometimes you forget there are real people involved, real lives at stake. Mother is right, Dravik agreed. If there's real instability, it won't just be us nobles affected. The common people will suffer more. Tenel couldn't hold back the sarcasm. Ah yes, the common people. Always so concerned about them, brother? You know they'd survive perfectly well. It's what they do survive, like cockroaches, regardless of conditions. Tenil, Lady Morel reprimanded, but there was more amusement than genuine reproach in her voice. It's the truth, Tenel insisted. Today I even saw one at the docks, carrying sacks of grain as if it were nothing, with that permanent expression of anger that commoners always seem to have, as if the world owed them something simply for existing. Dravik tilted his head, intrigued. And that bothered you? It didn't bother me. Tenel drank his wine, aware he was lying again. It just irritated me momentarily. Insolence is like a buzzing fly rotating, but insignificant. Dravik had that look he always used when he saw through Tenel. A fly you're still thinking about hours later. I'm not enough. Lord Vorten cut off the discussion with his command voice. We're not going to spend our last night together discussing commoners and politics. Tomorrow, Dravik and I depart early for the inspection of the northern lands. We'll be away for 3 days. I want to enjoy this night with family. Last night together? The words echoed in Tenel's mind strangely, like a distant bell ringing a warning he couldn't interpret. He shook his head, pushing away the silly thought. The rest of dinner flowed with lighter conversation. Dravik told stories about the Elorian emissaries. Lady Morel shared society gossip she'd heard from noble friends, and even Lord Vorten relaxed enough to laugh at some jokes. Tenel allowed himself to enjoy that moment, the soft candlelight, the smooth wine, the warmth of family around him. It was moments like this that confirmed his worldview. They were different, they were superior, and they were exactly where they should be in the natural order of things. When dinner ended, they moved to the sitting room, where a fireplace crackled comfortably. Lady Morel sat at the harpsichord and played soft melodies, while Lord Vorten and Dravik played chess in concentrated silence. Tenel stood by the window looking out at the moonlit gardens. Beyond the mansion walls, he could see the faint lights of the city. Thousands of small flickering flames where commoners live their small and insignificant lives. What do you see? Dravik appeared beside him, wineglass in hand. Order, Tenel replied. Each person in their appropriate place. US up here, them down there. Simple. Perfect. Sometimes, brother, I worry about you, Dravik said softly. You see the world so absolutely. And life is rarely absolute. Life is exactly as absolute as we choose to see it. Tenel turned to face him. You're the heir, Dravik. One day you'll govern this house. And when that day comes, I hope you'll maintain the standards our father established. That you'll understand our position isn't just privilege, it's responsibility to maintain order. Dravik smiled. In that gentle way of his. And you, little brother? What will your role be when that day comes? Tenel thought for a moment. To be your most loyal advisor, to be the one who tells you the hard truths no one else would dare say. To be the constant reminder that we are Vorten, and Vorten does not bow. Sounds lonely, Dravik observed. Sounds appropriate, Tenel corrected. They stood there for a while longer, side by side at the window, until Lady Morel announced she was tired and was going up to her chambers. Lord Vorten soon followed her, but not before placing a firm hand on each son's shoulder. You are good boys, he said, and there was something unusual in his voice, a momentary vulnerability. Vorten by blood, Vorten by honor. Never forget that. Never, father. Dravik promised. Never, Tenel echoed. When they were alone, Dravik yawned. I'm going to sleep too. Tomorrow will be a long day. He gave Tenel a quick hug, the kind of careless hug between brothers who see each other every day. Try not to spend all night thinking about that dock commoner, all right? I'm not, Tenil began, but Dravik was already leaving, laughing. Alone in the sitting room, Tenil returned to the window. The fireplace behind him crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. He didn't know why that strange sensation persisted, that indefinable weight in his chest, as if something important was about to change. He shook his head again, irritated with himself for allowing such melodramatic thoughts to invade his mind. Everything was exactly as it should be. Everything was perfectly in place. Tomorrow, his father and brother would depart for the northern lands. In 3 days, they would be back. And life would continue exactly as it always had, perfectly ordered, perfectly predictable. The morning mist had not yet completely dissipated when Tenil descended to the front courtyard. The air was cold, laden with the characteristic humidity of early autumn, and his breath formed small white clouds with each exhalation. He wrapped his velvet cloak more firmly around his shoulders as he observed the final preparations for the journey. 2 horses were being saddled by the stable hands, their hooves striking impatiently against the courtyard stones. A small supply carriage was already loaded with provisions for 3 days. 6 guards from House Vorten, wearing dark blue uniforms with the family crest embroidered in silver, checked their weapons and equipment with military efficiency. Lord Vorten now emerged through the main doors, already dressed in practical traveling clothes, yet still unmistakably noble. Fine leather boots, reinforced trousers, a linen shirt under a worked leather jacket. A long sword hung from his belt, more a status symbol than an actual tool, as it had been years since he'd needed to wield it in combat. "Good, you rose to see us off," Lord Vorten commented, a note of approving surprise in his voice. "I thought it would be appropriate," Tenil replied, keeping his tone light despite the strange sensation of weight in his chest that had persisted since the previous night. Dravik appeared next, adjusting the straps of a leather backpack. Unlike his father, he seemed genuinely excited about the journey, his brown eyes gleaming with anticipation. 3 days inspecting the northern lands, he said, approaching Tenil. "Perhaps we'll find some adventure along the way. A band of brigands to fight, or a maiden to rescue. Or perhaps you will simply inspect some lands and return with tedious reports about harvests and tenants." Tenil retorted with a dry smile. "You're impossible." Dravik laughed, pulling his brother into a quick embrace. "Try not to cause trouble while we're away, and please, be kind to Mother. You know how anxious she gets when Father and I leave together." "I'm always kind to Mother," Tenil protested. "You're polite to Mother," Dravik corrected. "There's a difference." Lord Vorten mounted his horse with the ease of someone who had spent decades in saddles, adjusting the reins with experienced hands. Dravik did the same, his horse whinnying softly as he settled in. "Tenil," Lord Vorten called, fixing that penetrating gaze on his youngest son. "While I'm away, you are the man of the house. Any important decisions must be yours. Any threat to the family, your responsibility. Understood?" Something in the seriousness of those words made Tenil unconsciously straighten his shoulders. "Yes, Father, understood." Good Lord Vorten gave a light touch with his heels to the horse. "We'll return in 3 days. Probably early evening on the 3rd day." The party began to move, hooves beating rhythmically against the stones, the sound echoing off the mansion walls. Tenil stood there, watching as they crossed through the main gates and followed the road leading north. The mist slowly swallowed them, first the guards at the rear, then the supply carriage, and finally the silhouettes of his father and brother, until all that remained was the distant sound of hooves that gradually dissolved into the morning silence. Tenil remained there for a few more minutes, that strange sensation of weight pressing against his chest. "Idiot," he thought to himself. "They'll be back in 3 days." 3 miserable, boring days. But when he finally turned to return to the mansion, he couldn't completely shake off the unease that accompanied him. The following 2 days dragged by with torturous slowness. Tenil spent the first day wandering through the mansion like an elegant ghost, trying to find ways to occupy his time. He read books in the library until the words blurred on the page. He practiced fencing with one of the remaining guards until both were exhausted. He dined with Lady Morel, who spent more time looking out the window than conversing. She always became like this when Lord Vorten and Dravik left together, anxious, distracted, as if some maternal instinct alerted her to invisible dangers. On the second day, Tenil decided he needed to leave the mansion before going mad with boredom. He ordered his carriage prepared and went to the city, visiting some of the family's commercial establishments, checking transaction records, pretending it was important. It was on the way back, when the carriage was passing through the docks again, that he saw her. Raya Feroz was working in the same place as before, but this time she was doing something different. Instead of carrying sacks, she was in a sort of improvised arena circle marked in the dirt, fighting against two men simultaneously. It wasn't a real fight, Tenil realized. It was training. But the ferocity with which she moved was absolutely real. "Stop the carriage," he ordered the coachman. "Sir?" I said stop. The carriage stopped at a safe distance, and Tenil descended, observing the scene with genuine curiosity. A small group of workers had formed a circle around the improvised arena, shouting encouragements and placing bets. Raya moved like water and fire at the same time, fluid in her dodges, explosive in her attacks. The two short swords she wielded gleamed under the afternoon sun, tracing deadly arcs that her opponents could barely block. One of the men attempted an overhead strike. She rolled to the side, the blade passing inches from her head, and counterattacked with an upward movement that would have opened the man's abdomen if the swords hadn't been blunted training weapons. The man staggered backward, defeated. The second tried to take advantage of the opening, but Raya spun on her own axis, one sword blocking his strike while the other pressed against his throat. Checkmate. The spectators erupted. In shouts and applause, coins changed hands as bets were settled. Raya wiped the sweat from her forehead with her arm, and that's when she saw him. Her amber eyes met Tenil's across the small crowd, and again, that expression of absolute contempt. But this time, there was something more. Challenge, as if she were inviting him to say something, to do something. Tenil felt the familiar anger bubbling up, but also something more complex. Involuntary respect, irritating, unwanted, but undeniable. She was competent, terribly competent. Without looking away, Raya spat on the ground again, that same gesture of disrespect, then deliberately turned her back on him, returning to her training companions as if Tenil were absolutely irrelevant. "Sir," the coachman called. "Should we return?" Tenil continued, watching for another moment, memorizing every detail. The way she moved, the absolute confidence in every gesture, the anger that seemed to burn in her eyes even when she smiled. "Yes," he finally replied, returning to the carriage. "Let's go back." But as the carriage drove away, he couldn't stop thinking. Who trains like that? Who fights like that? She's not just a dock worker. She's something more. A mercenary. A clandestine warrior. And why does this matter to me? He shook his head, irritated with himself again. When he returned home, he would focus his attention on important things, things worthy of his mind, not on commoners with delusions of grandeur. The third day arrived with agonizing slowness. Tenil woke early, took his breakfast alone, and spent most of the day in the library, trying to read, but constantly checking the sun's position through the windows. Early evening, his father had said. They would return in the early evening. Lady Morel was even more anxious than in the previous days. She circulated through the mansion like a caged bird, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting, giving contradictory orders to the servants, stopping every few minutes to look out the window toward the gates. "Mother, please, sit down," Tenil finally said when the sun began to descend on the horizon. "They'll arrive when they arrive." Your anxiety won't bring them faster. I know. I know. Lady Morel pressed a hand to her chest, breathing deeply. It's just that, ... I always get like this. I can't explain it. It's as if something inside me knew when something was wrong. Nothing is wrong, Tenel assured, though his own convictions sounded false to his ears. They're just inspecting lands. It's routine. Safe. They have 6 trained guards. You're right. Of course you are. She forced a smile. Forgive me for being foolish. Dinner was prepared, but neither had much appetite. They ate mechanically, their eyes constantly drifting to the windows, hoping to see the light of torches approaching. Early evening passed, full night arrived, and the gates remained silent and empty. Perhaps they decided to leave later. Lady Morel suggested, her voice tense. Or perhaps they found something on the lands that required extra attention. Surely, Tenel agreed. But the sensation of weight in his chest, the one that had accompanied him since the morning of departure, had transformed into something denser, darker. They moved to the sitting room, where a fireplace crackled. Lady Morel tried to play the harpsichord, but her fingers stumbled on the keys, producing disconnected and nervous melodies. Eventually, she simply stopped, her hands trembling slightly over the silent keys. Tenil, she said softly. You feel it too, don't you? This weight. This ... darkness. He wanted to lie. Wanted to reassure her with confident words and rational logic. But when he looked into his mother's eyes and saw the real fear there, the truth came out before he could contain it. Yes, I feel it. They sat there for another hour, the clock on the wall marking each second with cruel regularity. Midnight came and passed. 1 in the morning, that's when they heard it. The sound of hooves at a gallop. Fast, desperate. Nothing like the measured rhythm of departure. Tenel and Lady Morel rose simultaneously, running to the main door. The servants were already moving, lighting torches, opening the gates. A single rider entered the courtyard, his horse foaming at the mouth, its flanks sweaty and trembling. The rider dismounted, staggering, and Tenel recognized him immediately. Gareth, one of the veteran guards who had accompanied his father and brother. But he was alone, and he was covered in blood. Gareth. Tenel ran to him, gripping him by the shoulders. Where are my father and brother? What happened? Gareth's eyes were wild, traumatized. Blood dripped from a wound on his forehead, and when he tried to speak, his voice came out hoarse and broken. Ambush ... at Raven's Pass. They knew ... knew exactly where we would be. ... where are they? Lady Morel's voice came out shrill on the verge of hysteria. Gareth, where's my family? The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Gareth fell to his knees, tears mixing with the blood on his face. Forgive me, my lady. Forgive me, young lord. I tried. We all tried ... but there were too many. Too well coordinated ... It was as if they were waiting specifically for us ... double quotes. Tenel's world tilted on its axis. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense? What are you saying? His own voice sounded distant to his ears. Be clear, Gareth. What exactly are you saying? Gareth raised his eyes, and in them, Tenel saw the answer even before the words were spoken. Lord Vorten is dead. Dravik is dead. Of the 8 men who departed, only I survived to bring the news. Lady Morel emitted a sound that wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a moan. It was something more primitive, more fundamental. It's the sound of a soul shattering. She collapsed, and Tenel caught her only by instinct, his own knees threatening to give way. The world continued, tilting, spinning, refusing to stabilize. Dead father is dead. Dravik is dead. Impossible, absurd, unreal, but Gareth's blood was real. The terror in his eyes was real. The sound of his mother's broken heart was devastatingly, unbearably real. How? Tenil heard his own voice, strange and too controlled. How did this happen? Tell me everything. Every detail. Gareth took a deep breath, trembling. We were returning through Raven's Pass, as planned. It's the fastest route back. But when we reached the narrow gorge, they were waiting. In the rocks above. Arrows first, dozens of them, from all angles. "15. They weren't common bandits, sir. They were trained assassins, and they didn't want our gold or supplies. Tenil completed, and something cold and sharp began to form in his chest, expelling the shock, replacing it with something different. Yes. Gareth swallowed hard. Your father fought like a lion, killed 3 of them alone, and young Dravik. He placed himself between your father and the blades, shouting for Lord Vorten to retreat. He died saving your father. But there were too many, far too many. Servants had gathered around, faces pale with shock, some openly weeping. And you? Tenil asked, that strange and controlled voice still coming from his mouth. How did you escape? Gareth closed his eyes, the pain clear on his face. Kasimir. The name echoed in Tenil's mind like a funeral bell. Kasimir. The nobleman close to the king. The man who had offered a commercial partnership. The man his father had refused. Still at Raven's Pass, sir. I couldn't. There was no way to send men at dawn. Bring my father and brother home. The words came out automatically, mechanically. Prepare the funeral hall. And ... double quotes. He paused, something crystallizing in his mind. Something fundamental changing. And tell the remaining guards to double the watch. If Kasimir dared to do this, he may come after me too. Lock the gates. No one enters or leaves without my explicit permission. Yes, sir. Gareth rose unsteadily, other servants rushing to help him. Tenil stood there, holding his mother as she wept, looking toward the gates where, just 3 days ago, he had watched his father and brother depart for the last time. The world he knew had ended. The perfect order, the natural hierarchy, the absolute certainty of his place in it all, shattered in a single moment of calculated violence. But in place of the shock, in place of the pain he knew would come later, there was something more immediate forming. Rage, pure, distilled, absolute, and more than rage, purpose. Kasimir had destroyed his family, had murdered his father and brother, had dared to attack House Fortune. And Tenil would make him pay. No matter how long it took, no matter what it cost, no matter what he needed to become. And so, the first tale of our chronicles comes to an end. To all who have ventured here, our heartfelt thanks. Your presence marks the beginning of a saga filled with legends, mysteries, and epic stories yet to be told. If this narrative sparked your curiosity, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Activate notifications to ensure no tale escapes you. The tapestry of time is vast, and we still have many threads to weave together. Until the next legend echoes here, may the ancient stories light your path. See you soon, dear listener, and thank you for being here.